For decades, classic Hollywood has been cloaked in glamour, mystery, and untold truths. At the heart of this golden era were stars whose on-screen chemistry captivated audiences, while behind the scenes, their personal connections often carried stories the public never fully knew. Among these legends were Deborah Kerr and Burt Lancaster, whose unforgettable pairing in the 1953 film From Here to Eternity created one of cinema's most iconic scenes, a passionate kiss on a Hawaiian beach that remains etched in film history. To fans, it looked like pure romance, the kind of love that seemed larger than life. But what few realized was that behind the curtain, Deborah Kerr carried her own memories, her own observations, and even frustrations about her co-star. For years, Kerr kept her silence, preferring dignity over gossip. She rarely entertained questions about her private life or the more complicated dynamics of her working relationships. Yet as time passed, pieces of her truth began to emerge, reflections that revealed a more nuanced view of Burt Lancaster than audiences could have ever imagined. Now, looking back at her words, we begin to see a fascinating picture, a mix of admiration, conflict, vulnerability, and revelation. Deborah Kerr, always graceful and measured, finally pulled back the curtain to share what really happened, and what she truly thought about Burt Lancaster. What she revealed was not only surprising, but also a reminder that even Hollywood legends were human, full of contradictions and secrets that shaped their legacies. The 1950s were a defining decade in Hollywood history. Audiences flocked to theaters to see sweeping romances, daring war dramas, and the kind of on-screen passion that left them breathless. Among the films that cemented this golden age was From Here to Eternity, 1953, a movie that not only won multiple Academy Awards, but also produced one of the most iconic moments in film history, the beach kiss between Deborah Kerr and Burt Lancaster. To the public, it was the epitome of romance, the perfect collision of two stars whose chemistry seemed so real that it blurred the lines between performance and reality. But for Deborah Kerr, the truth behind the curtain was far more complicated. Kerr, already a respected actress with a reputation for elegance and restraint, was initially hesitant about her role. Known for her refined, often aristocratic characters, stepping into the part of Karen Holmes, a dissatisfied wife caught in a torrid affair, was a bold departure from her image. Hollywood executives saw it as a risk, but Kerr accepted the challenge, determined to expand her range. She was aware that much of the weight of the film's success rested on her ability to match Lancaster's rugged presence with a layered performance of her own. Burt Lancaster, on the other hand, was already the picture of Hollywood masculinity. With his athletic build and magnetic energy, he embodied the kind of forceful charisma that defined the post-war leading man. To many, he was untouchable. Yet working opposite him wasn't as seamless as it appeared on screen. Deborah Kerr later admitted that while Lancaster was professional and committed, he could also be domineering. His larger-than-life personality sometimes overwhelming to those around him. The famous beach scene, for example, became the subject of endless fascination. Fans believed that Kerr and Lancaster shared a genuine spark, one that might have spilled off screen. Decades later, however, Kerr revealed that the scene was far from romantic in the moment. Filming on the Hawaiian beach was physically uncomfortable, with crashing waves, sand sticking to their skin, and the pressure of getting the shot just right. What the audience saw as pure passion was, in reality, a carefully orchestrated sequence full of retakes, physical discomfort, and professional focus. Kerr would later remark that Lancaster was determined to make the kiss as powerful as possible, pushing her to match his intensity. This wasn't to say there wasn't respect between them. Kerr acknowledged Lancaster's undeniable talent and dedication to his craft, but she also pointed out his strong will, which sometimes clashed with her own more reserved nature. The balance of power between them wasn't always equal, and Kerr felt it was important to maintain her dignity while working alongside such an overpowering presence. She never allowed herself to be overshadowed, even when the cameras, and much of Hollywood, seemed to favor Lancaster's larger-than-life aura. What fans never realized is that Kerr's performance in From Here to Eternity was as much about her own quiet resilience as it was about acting. While Lancaster exuded dominance, Kerr brought a subtle strength, refusing to let the narrative, or her co-star, diminish her contribution. She later hinted that working with Lancaster was both a challenge and a revelation, one that taught her the importance of holding her ground in a male-dominated industry. And so, the story of their iconic kiss wasn't just about romance. It was about power, image, and the unspoken tensions that defined Hollywood in the 1950s. What audiences saw was a fantasy, but what Deborah Kerr experienced was the reality of working alongside one of Hollywood's most formidable figures, a truth she would only begin to reveal years later. To the millions who saw, From Here to Eternity, the chemistry between Deborah Kerr and Burt Lancaster was undeniable. The sight of the refined Kerr embracing the rugged Lancaster in the surf became more than just a film moment. It became a cultural symbol of passion. For decades, magazines, critics, and fans speculated endlessly about whether there was more to their on-screen relationship. Was the kiss merely acting, or was it an extension of a hidden off-screen romance? Deborah Kerr, ever the professional, maintained her silence for many years. She was not one to indulge in Hollywood gossip or feed the tabloids. Yet when she finally spoke about those days, her revelations painted a fascinating and sometimes sobering picture of the dynamics at play. Kerr admitted that the chemistry viewers saw was carefully cultivated, not born of personal intimacy, but of sheer dedication to the craft. She respected Lancaster's talent, but she made it clear that their connection was never romantic in real life. Kerr revealed that Lancaster's presence could be both inspiring and intimidating. His confidence filled the set, and while it often elevated the energy of a scene, it could also leave his co-stars feeling overshadowed. Kerr was determined not to let herself be consumed by his intensity. She explained that maintaining her composure and independence was key, not just in her scenes, but in her career as a whole. This was especially important in an industry where actresses were often expected to yield to their male co-stars. What most fans never realized was how deliberate Kerr's choices were in shaping her performance. She brought subtlety where Lancaster brought force, grace where he brought fire. The contrast was what made their pairing so unforgettable. While Lancaster embodied raw masculinity, Kerr exuded an inner strength that refused to bend. She later confessed that this dynamic mirrored real life, Lancaster pushing boundaries and Kerr holding firm. Their professional relationship was not without its friction. Kerr acknowledged that there were moments when Lancaster's ego clashed with her quiet determination. Yet she also emphasized that those very tensions were what made the performances come alive. The passion on screen was not an illusion, but it was not personal romance either. It was the product of two skilled actors channeling their differences into something audiences could feel deeply. Beyond the set, Kerr was candid about her impressions of Lancaster as a man. She admired his work ethic and his courage to take risks as an actor. Yet she also noted his flaws, his quick temper, his need to dominate, and his struggle to separate his screen persona from his real self. For Kerr, who valued privacy and integrity, these traits sometimes created distance between them. Still, she never dismissed him. Instead, she chose to frame him as a man of contradictions, someone capable of immense charm and equal amounts of stubbornness. What audiences never figured out was that the chemistry they adored was not a reflection of secret love, but a reflection of two strong personalities locked in a kind of artistic duel. Lancaster was forceful, Kerr was unyielding, and together they struck a balance that became legendary. Years later, when Kerr finally spoke openly, she revealed that their performances were less about romance and more about survival, about ensuring neither was lost in the other's shadow. In exposing this truth, Deborah Kerr shattered one of Hollywood's longest-standing myths. She revealed that the passion of From Here to Eternity was an act of discipline, not desire. And in doing so, she reminded the world that behind every iconic scene was not just glamour, but the raw and complicated reality of two actors navigating fame. Ego and the weight of public expectation. For years, Deborah Kerr was known for her discretion. Unlike many of her peers, she avoided scandal and rarely spoke unkindly of anyone in Hollywood. She valued her reputation as a professional and dignified actress, not one prone to controversy. Yet, with time, as she reflected on her career and the personalities she encountered, She began to reveal fragments of her truth about Burt Lancaster. What she eventually admitted was surprising to many. Though she respected Lancaster's artistry, she described him as overbearing and sometimes too forceful, both on and off the screen. Kerr confessed that his determination to dominate every moment often created tension, not only with her but with others as well. To her, Lancaster represented ascertained kind of Hollywood masculinity that thrived on control and intensity. While this worked well in front of the camera, it could be exhausting behind it. Kerr shared that Lancaster would sometimes push her beyond her comfort zone, demanding a level of energy and physicality that wasn't always necessary. In their iconic beach scene, for example, Lancaster was relentless in his desire to make the kiss as explosive as possible. While the result became immortalized in film history, Kerr later admitted that she often felt smothered, battling the crashing waves, the invasive sand, and Lancaster's dominating embrace. "It looked beautiful," she explained, "but it wasn't exactly the passionate moment people think it was." But Kerr didn't stop there. She also revealed that Lancaster, despite his charm, had a darker side, a temper that could flare when things didn't go his way. On set, his impatience could create uncomfortable moments, especially for those who were less assertive. Kerr, however, was not easily intimidated. She insisted on standing her ground, making it clear that she would not be bullied or overshadowed. This quiet defiance became her shield, and it earned Lancaster's grudging respect, even if it caused friction. The most startling revelation came when Kerr acknowledged that the myth of a secret romance between them was completely unfounded. For decades, fans had fantasized that their on-screen passion reflected a real-life affair, but Kerr firmly denied this. She admitted that while Lancaster was magnetic and capable of charm, she never allowed herself to be drawn into the kind of off-screen entanglements Hollywood thrived on. For her, professionalism came first, and she refused to blur the lines between performance and personal life. Still, Kerr did not paint Lancaster as a villain. Instead, she exposed the complexity of his character, a man of great talent, charisma, and ambition, but also of ego and volatility. She admitted that their differences sometimes frustrated her, but she also credited him with pushing her to deliver one of the most daring performances of her career. Without his fire, perhaps her portrayal of Karen Holmes wouldn't have been as powerful. Without her resistance, perhaps Lancaster's Sergeant Warden wouldn't have had the same depth. In the end, Deborah Kerr's revelations were less about tearing Lancaster down and more about telling the truth. She revealed the man behind the legend, flawed, fiery, and human. And in doing so, she broke one of Hollywood's longest-held illusions, that the passion audiences saw was simple and romantic. Instead, it was a carefully constructed performance built on tension, resistance, and two strong-willed actors refusing to give in to one another. For fans who had worshipped the fantasy for decades, Kerr's honesty was both shocking and refreshing. It reminded the world that behind every glamorous Hollywood story lies a deeper, more complicated reality, and one that, sooner or later, finds its way into the light. As the years passed, From Here to Eternity remained a crown jewel in Hollywood's golden era, and the beach scene between Deborah Kerr and Burt Lancaster continued to define cinematic passion for generations. Yet, when Kerr finally spoke openly about her experience, the myth of effortless romance was forever altered. What fans thought was an unfiltered moment of desire was, in truth, a product of grit, discomfort, and a clash of two strong personalities determined to leave their mark. Kerr's willingness to reveal the truth about Lancaster wasn't meant to diminish his reputation. Instead, it was her way of reclaiming her own story. For too long, audiences had assumed that she was simply swept up in Lancaster's charisma, both on screen and off. By finally speaking up, she reminded the world that she was not merely a supporting player to his dominance, but an equal force in her own right. She insisted that her role was not defined by him, but alongside him. She also exposed the cost of Hollywood illusions. The film's romance, beloved for its beauty, came at the price of Kerr's physical discomfort and emotional endurance. The waves that crashed around her, the sand that clung to her skin, and the relentless retakes demanded by Lancaster all left a lasting impression. Audiences saw glamour, but Kerr carried the reality, a memory of labor, not love. In revealing this, she showed how the magic of cinema is often built on sacrifice, and how the actors who create that magic are sometimes left unseen. Still, Kerr did not deny Lancaster's brilliance. She acknowledged that his intensity helped fuel the film's lasting power, yet she also emphasized that his flaws were just as real as his talents. He was charming and magnetic, but also impatient and controlling. By exposing both sides of him, Kerr painted a fuller, more human portrait of the man behind the legend. It was this honesty that finally allowed fans to see beyond the screen, to understand that Burt Lancaster was neither flawless idol nor villain, but a complicated man who left a complicated legacy. What makes Kerr's revelations so powerful is that they reframed the entire narrative. For decades, Lancaster was celebrated as the star of From Here to Eternity, while Kerr's role was often remembered as secondary to his. By speaking openly, she reminded the world that her performance was just as vital, and that without her resilience, the film's most iconic moment would not exist. Her truth was a quiet act of empowerment, proof that even in an industry that often minimized women, she held her own. In the end, Kerr's decision to expose her reality was not an act of bitterness, but of liberation. She left behind a story that was honest, nuanced, and human. Her revelations allowed audiences to finally understand the truth, that the legendary kiss was not about romance, but about two actors pushing each other to the limits, both battling the waves, the cameras, and each other's forceful personalities. And so, the legacy of Deborah Kerr and Burt Lancaster lives on, not as a fairy tale of effortless love, but as a reminder of the humanity behind Hollywood's illusions. Kerr's voice, steady and uncompromising, finally ensured that her side of the story would be heard. And in exposing the truth about Burt Lancaster, she didn't just reshape how we see one scene. She reshaped how we remember an entire era of Hollywood.